G'day friends, and welcome to another one of my videos. Today we're doing a bit of a road test on the M50 yet again, but using a Zhiyun-Tech gimbal to stabilize the 4K image. So if you want to see if this little experiment's going to work, well then stick around.
Wanna move my feet, wanna drink my wine, wanna move my feet, wanna drink my wine, wanna move my feet, wanna drink my wine, wanna move my feet, wanna drink my wine. Wanna move my feet, wanna drink my wine, wanna move my feet, wanna drink my wine, wanna move my feet, wanna drink my wine, wanna move my feet.
And welcome back. Now the two main issues that I have with the Canon M50 just happen to be in 4K mode. I love the camera for everything else, but in 4K mode, one of the issues is that auto stabilization does not exist. So it is rendered null when you have it in 4K mode, and unless you mount your camera on a tripod, you will not have a great viewing experience. Issue number two, the dual pixel autofocus mode does not work in 4K either. And so not only are you going to have shaky images unless you're in a tripod, focus tends to hunt between a foreground and background, and you get terrible looking images even though you may have your camera mounted on a tripod. So today's experiment is going to try to overcome this issue. So what I'm doing is mounting the M50 on my old Zhiyun-Tech version 1 gimbal. And I haven't used this gimbal in quite some time. So I thought I'd dust it off and use it. So I'm going to mount the M50 on the gimbal. I'm also going to put on the 11 to 22 millimeter lens to overcome some of the cropping issues, and I am also going to set it in manual focus. Now I have to play with the aperture in order to get as much as I can in focus, because if I open the aperture wide, then obviously things are going to be out of focus. So let's go and do a bit of a road test with this setup, and let's see how these images turn out and have a bit of a chat about it.
Okay, so the one thing I am not going to do is show you how to balance your camera on a gimbal. There's about 1 million videos on how to do that online, so check YouTube out if you want to learn how to do that. One of the things that I did notice with different lenses is that the M50 may be too light a camera for some gimbals, so make sure that the range or the weight of the camera is within the recommended range of the gimbal. Now I put the 11 to 22 millimeter lens on the actual M50, and that gives it a nice weight, so I didn't have any problems balancing it. Now the way I set up the camera was like this. So I had it at 4K 25 frames per second mode with the shutter speed of 1/50 to give it that cinematic look. The aperture was set at 5.6 to give me a good medium range focus, but in this case the fairy in the background was nicely well in focus while the foreground was not so much, but that was good enough for this particular exercise. I set the ISO at auto because of the changing light conditions. So you had a sunny day with a lot of clouds, so at times it got really bright and then it got a bit shady when the sun went behind the clouds. Now I did use an ND filter to adjust, but you can adjust that as required. Now, one point to note, I did set the focal length on the lens at 11mm. Now that expands the lens to its full length, so you have to make sure that when you balance your gimbal, you actually have the lens at that focal length so it remains balanced when you start recording. Now the gimbal is great for shots like this when you're panning, but because of the focus, if you use it in selfie mode like this, obviously having manual focus means that my head is out of focus and the background is in focus, so that really didn't work too well from that perspective. But panning and scanning works really, really great. So gimbals are known for the great angles and shots you can get. Here's one of me harassing some seagulls, and then after they all go past, I elevated to show the rest of the boardwalk, which is kind of cool. Now I got really low, doing a bit of a ninja walk, making sure that I didn't bump the camera way too much, and then I slowly elevated to reveal the harbour or Lavender Bay in the background. And here's another test of the stabilization and the lack of focus. Obviously it's manual focus and it's focusing on the background as I get a heart attack in the foreground. So the gimbal is quite useful, and so far the M50 is actually behaving itself really well with the manual focus, and I seem to get a really good quality images. Now here's me walking very slowly and trying to not bump the camera as I walk, and I seem to be getting reasonably good results. Now as I pick up speed, you can see on the pylons that I am getting some bounce, but you wouldn't even know it. I mean, this is almost G5 sort of stabilization. The Panasonic seems to do it really well, and you wouldn't know the difference. This is 4K, getting really close to that seagull, and gets the heck out of there. So I thought I'd take the opportunity to shoot a time lapse while I was here, and I've got the gimbal sort of set nice and steady, just to see if it would make a good replacement for a tripod. Now obviously, because it is mechanical and it is working, and when the wind hits it, it does give it a bit of motion. But I noticed that all in all, for a 5-minute time lapse, it did reasonably well, and I was pretty happy to use it. Not the most perfect time lapse, I mean, but it was pretty good. So if you have a look at this, it did a reasonably good shot at staying nice and steady. Now the other surprise is that I used the gimbal and I focused on the Opera House, and it made for a really great hyperlapse.
And there you have it, friends, my take on the Canon M50's 4K capabilities assisted with a gimbal. Now it doesn't have to be this gimbal, it could be any gimbal as long as it can support the payload of the camera, and it can actually help you stabilize the images that you want to capture. So today's stabilization was done purely by this gimbal. By no means it's an expensive gimbal. There's lots more expensive gimbals out there, so make sure you choose wisely. They all do different things, but the features from a stabilization perspective are all very common. So that's it. I hope you liked the video and I hope you got something out of it. I'm making sure that the investment that I've put on my Canon M50 comes to fruition. Obviously it does have its downsides, especially on the stabilization side and on the focusing side, but with a bit of assistance we can get better shots in the future. So if you like the video, give me a like. If you haven't subscribed already, please do so already. Your support does count. And until the next time, ciao for now.